Hi there. Welcome to Ask a Fractional Q&A. My name is Jillian Middlemark, and I'm joined today here with David Bonfilio and Corey Hanscom. And together we've come to join a group of fractional professionals to bring awareness of how fractional support can add value and help growing organizations. So today we're going to be talking with David to ask him about how fractional sales can support businesses. So David, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about what a good profile of a business that could use fractional sales leadership.
So there are two pieces to that answer, I think. One is the profile of the business, and the other is the profile of the person who might make this kind of hire, maybe the CEO or the owner or founder. Let me talk a little bit about the business first. What's typical, I think, or the company profile for whom this kind of resource, I think, is probably most relevant is a company probably in the size or what I would call sort of a standard small, medium sized business. Talking about revenues in the 3 million up to about 50 million in revenue. And I also think that it's probably relevant for companies maybe up to 5 salespeople, and predominantly it's appropriate for B2B companies. That seems to be the profile that makes most sense for this kind of resource, because it can represent sort of a transitional element from maybe stalled revenue to being up and running and growing again, and being able then to hire a full-time sales leader at that point. Now, the profile of the person, I think, is probably someone who is, frankly, the owner, CEO, who's probably managing those salespeople right now, managing sales, and are running into problems that they're not really sure how to solve. They just lost their best salesperson, don't know what to do. They're plateauing in revenue. They don't really know why or how to solve that. And so those are some of the things that are sort of that would be the profile of the business and the person who hires this resource that might make for a good conversation about this.
Okay, David, that makes good sense. What kinds of services do you provide a company in those situations?
So it's not unusual for that kind of company to have maybe gotten up to a place where they've grown, they're profitable, they've got employees, but they haven't really done the work of creating a real solid, what I call sales infrastructure, the foundational stuff. So in that instance, the first thing that I typically do with a company is make sure that that infrastructure is laid in, is in place. Things like job descriptions and comp plans and CRM organization and the identification of a sales process, stuff like that, onboarding. Those things need to have been in place, and then that's the foundation upon which a company's revenue can scale and grow. So that's the first part of what I can do as a fractional VP of sales. The second part then is jumping into the driver's seat, if you will, and actually managing that sales department. And in that role, I'm running sales meetings, doing one-on-ones, hiring and firing. I'm going on sales calls. I'm coaching. I'm training, working on sales initiatives. That in that it's the same role that a VP of sales would typically have, but I'm only doing it fractionally, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, whatever whatever's appropriate. The idea being, of course, is that once we can get all of that stuff up and running, hopefully we'll do in some period of time, reasonable period of time, we'll be able to hire a full-time replacement and be able to put someone in that seat who can continue to drive that revenue forward. So those are the big things. The secondary things, but are also important, are things like helping to hire a salesperson or two, creating a sales playbook, doing assessments, things like that. So those are the big pieces. Those are the big things that I bring to a client.
That's wonderful. Such an important skill set to have on a team. How did you decide to go down this fractional path?
The why. That's a interesting question. And I've been in sales a long time, been a VP of sales for a long time, couple of decades. And I'll try to keep this brief, Jillian, but here's the why behind why I'm doing this. And I'm sorry, but it goes back to after college and graduate school when uh, I had a pretty cool job in a weird city. I was a TV news reporter in Altoona, Pennsylvania, of all places, getting married, making $16,000 a year, 1 6. And I'm like, okay, that's not enough money for me to have a family. And so I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. And someone at the TV station said to me, thankfully, said, news and sales are not all that different. You go out, you talk to people, you find stuff out. Maybe you convince them to do something. And I was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. I'll do it. And so on a Friday night, I anchored the 6 o'clock news as a fill-in. Monday morning, I came back after that weekend to the same station, and they said, go find us some business. And that was my entree into sales. It was fabulous. I loved it. I took to it to like duck to water. And 2.5 years later, they hired me to manage that group. That was the start of my corporate ladder climb. So over years in cities, you know what? I went through director of sales and VP of sales. And what I realized were a bunch of things over that period of time. VP of sales is pretty good for the bank account. It's really good for the Delta Sky Miles account. It's really good for the Hilton Honors account. So, but it's not good for being with your family. And I ended up in a divorce. Now, I have since remarried and have a beautiful blended family. But what I learned through that arc, regardless of the title I had, was that I needed to stay focused on people I love, and I needed to stay focused on the things I love to do. And what I love to do in sales more than anything else is to work directly with business owners and CEOs, work hand in hand, arm in arm, working on a shared vision on helping to realize that company's growth potential. That's what I love to do. And so that's why I'm doing this, so that I can sort of pare down everything else down and do what I love doing most, kind of like what I started doing in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So I'm going to finish my sales work the way I started, working in a way that is really fulfilling and that I love a lot. So that's why I've made this decision to make this change.
That's great.
That's great. It really sounds like sales is your calling, David.
I think it is.
I was curious. You mentioned working with CEOs. Then, so what do you decide if uh, for how you want to work with the company,
Mm,
or what companies do you think are ready
yeah,
for
yeah,
your expertise?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I've talked about that profile of business, right? But here's the thing that fractional allows me to do, allows us to do as fractionals, which is very different from the corporate world. There are two sort of decision points around this for me. Certainly, clients can decide whether they want me to work for them. That's clear. But now I get to make the decision: do I want to work for them? Do I want that? And that's a whole new thing, right? Uh, and so here are my two criteria. One, can I help them? Am I convinced that I can help them? And, in most instances, that answer is going to be yes, but it's important to make sure that that is in fact the case. And then the second part is, do I like them? Are they good people? Do they have the value system that I share? Is there going to be, sort of a connection in that regard? Because that's the stuff that that's really important to me. So those are really the two things that I think about when I'm deciding whether I want to work with a client or not.
So when you find that right fit, what is the typical length of an engagement for you?
Mm, yeah. So in the perfect world, it can be 3 to 4 months, up to a year, or maybe a little more, because The 3 or 4 months is that first part, that infrastructure part that I mentioned, right? That project of getting all of that foundation laid is typically a 3 or 4 month project. The second part of that, which is to sort of manage that sales team or that sales department, is typically another 6 to 9 months, maybe a little more. But again, the effort is to try to work me out of a job so that they can hire a full-time replacement for that fractional role that I'm playing. So I'm going to tell you that it's probably in the 3 month to the 12, 14 month range. That's a fairly typical engagement length.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I think that that's a great summary, David, of how you can support businesses as a fractional sales leader. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. If you're listening today and you're a fractional business owner that would like to join us on our Q&A, we'd be happy to have you. Or if you're a business owner that's interested in fractional resources, please reach out. We'd love to answer your questions and have you join us as well. Or follow us on our LinkedIn page at the Ask a Fractional. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to everyone soon.